Okay, if you guys can hear me, just somebody give me a thumbs up in the chat. It'll take a few seconds. Oh, I see.
Yeah,
what
it says
happened.
live now.
Okay, it was Twitter was giving me hassle on streaming to Twitter. So, okay, we're live. Sorry, folks. We're trying to stream live to Twitter. So this is John Haller. I have with me Patrick Wood, Scott Townsend, and Britt Gillette. We're going to talk to you tonight a little bit about end times and technology, technocracy, transhumanism, artificial intelligence, and related subjects. And if you want to ask questions, we'll try to moderate those or try to pick those up. Type question in all caps in the chat, and we'll try to pick up some of those questions as we go through. We're going to try to keep this to 2 hours because of other obligations that some of us have. And we're going to try to end on a positive note, but I will be upfront with you tonight. You're going to hear some things that you probably don't like, but I think that we need to discuss in pretty stark detail about the things that are going on. So, Patrick, I want to start with you. You've written sort of, I think, the definitive book on technocracy and transhumanism. And you've been studying technocracy for a lot of years.
Yeah.
Just sort of give us just sort of a thumbnail sketch of your thesis on technocracy and how it relates to end times.
Well,
please do it completely and fully in 2 minutes.
First off, it was coined as an economic system in the 1930s at Columbia University. They decided to define themselves, however, as the system of science, the science of social engineering. That was the first thing that they let off with. And that's kind of odd in a way, because we see this propaganda floating around all over the place. The social engineering is going on in the world today. That really fits what's going on today. But behind that was an economic system that wanted to micromanage everything that happens in the economy. Everything is produced. Of course, that takes resources. Everything that's consumed, end to end. They wanted to know what everybody where they were, for one thing, and where they got their goods from, and what they were spending their money on, and et cetera. This was basically a scientific dictatorship without a political system on top of it. They wanted to do away with the political system altogether and just simply run everything. Let technocrats, engineers, scientists, whatever, run everything in society, make all the decisions for everybody. And based on that, what do you need politics for? You don't need to discuss anything. This reminds you of Anthony Fauci basically standing up and saying, well, you know, you can't take a shot at me. I'm just representing the science here. We have the science. This is very egotistical. It's very, I don't know what the word is, but it's disturbing for sure. That's it. That's it in a nutshell. And
so, how long has this been going on, and how long has it been developing, and what is your view of the current state of it? How far has it gone down the road?
It was resuscitated by David Rockefeller and Zbigniew Brzezinski in 1973, when the Trilateral Commission was formed. They said they were going to create a new international economic order. I didn't know what that was at the time. I do now. It was technocracy they were talking about. That was based on Brzezinski's earlier book called Between Two Ages, America's Role in the Technotronic Era. I won't discuss that at this point, but that's where the idea came from. The early technocrats got no money from anybody, including the Rockefellers, by the way. No Carnegie money, no Mellon money, et cetera. They were living on a shoestring, in the 30s and 40s. But when Rockefeller got into the mix, he saw it as an opportunity for him in particular, and for the global elitists, to do something that's never been done before, namely to get all the resources in the world into their pocket. And that kind of became the mission of the Trilateral Commission, was to rearrange everything in the system to favor them, so they can get resources away from the people, away from the nation states, away from organizations, etc. And this is why now, for instance, that you see this audacious statement by Klaus Schwab a few years ago that says by 2030, you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. You won't forget the happy part, obviously. But, they saw this coming a long time ago. This is the end goal of this whole thing, including sustainable development, Agenda 21, 2030 Agenda, et cetera. All of this is designed to twist the resources away from the people of the world and put them into their hands. And if they can do that, of course, the money system on top of it really doesn't matter. You could trade in your firstborn child or wampum or beads or whatever. What doesn't matter. If you got it and people want it, you can ask whatever you want. So this is now an advanced stage where we're closing in on 2030. That doesn't mean they'll get it by then, but nevertheless, that's the target they're setting right now. 2030 is going to be the day that they close the trap on this whole thing. So anyway, it's very advanced and a very advanced stage right now, and that's why we're talking about it.
In fact, in September, the UN will be having what are they calling it in New York City? The Summit of the Future.
Yes,
they're going to try to push through the Pact for the Future, which sort of incorporates all of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. So I see somebody asking, complimenting you, Patrick, on your article on Peter Thiel and J.D. Vance. Now, I want to talk about that in just a moment, but before that, I want to address this Supreme Court decision. So let me kind of give you my thesis on the recent Supreme Court decision overturning the Chevron doctrine. And the Chevron doctrine came into being in 1984, interestingly enough, on that date. It was the Warren Burger Court, and I believe it was a 6-0 decision. And in the 6-0 decision, the Burger Court, and by the way, Reagan had already made a few appointments like Sandra Day O'Connor or William Rehnquist, and I think one other, but they did not participate in this decision because it was going through the court before they were appointed, so they can't decide the case. So the 6 justices voted 6-0, and they essentially said, if a federal agency is given some authority or they're acting in their authority, there's a presumption that they're going to act constitutionally and reasonably and all that sort of thing. Now, my thesis, Patrick, and you can tell me if I'm totally out of the water on this, I think that as technocracy developed, and as you noted, it was going on for decades before 1984, but at least in the United States, the last bastion was sort of the legal protection that people thought they had with the protection of limited government under the Constitution. Mm-hmm. And the Chevron doctrine blew that completely out of the water and said, we have to assume that the technocrats in these government bureaucracies are acting correctly. And it was almost impossible to prove that they were not. And so I would say my thesis is that if you looked at like a map of Washington, D.C., and the demographics and housing and that type of thing in 1984, and then compared it to 40 years later, you're going to see tremendous growth in property values and population and that type of thing. And I think it was, my personal opinion is, now I haven't researched this greatly, but I have observed what's happened over my lifetime. That 40 years ago, that sort of is covers the period of my legal career, that the Chevron doctrine really was important in embedding technocracy in our government. Do you agree with that or not? Or tell me I'm wrong if you think I'm wrong.
It's a curious relationship that technocrats have with the government. They obviously had an influence in the he and his running mate were members of this Trilateral Commission at the time, and you see all the other people moving into government positions, high-level government positions, for instance, the cabinet and separate Secretary of State, other positions as well. However, the only reason that I believe that those people took over our government, quote unquote, was only to get their hands on the economic engine of the world. If you wanted to, if your goal was to reform the economic system of the world, you had to have control over the engine of that economic system. It was the United States. They had to have control over that. We see this, however, we see this antipathy playing out today, where it's obvious now technocrats really don't like the government. They don't like anything the government does. They don't have, they would, if they could wave a magic wand and make it all go away, they would. So when you talk about, could they have used the Chevron ruling back then to advance some of their goals? Absolutely. However, now the goal is to get a government out of the way altogether so that they can just do what they want to do. And you see this pushback against government now. That it's pleasing to us, by the way. You have to cheer the Supreme Court for putting these people in their place. On one hand, we don't want the government doing things like colluding with social media to censor everybody. But on the other hand, you have to see it from the technocrat point of view. If they could undo every regulation in the world, they would do it. We've seen this push since Reagan came in, the whole movement of deregulation of everything. This is just kind of, you know, we see this, but it wasn't for us that they did it. It was for them because they wanted to eventually have control of everything.
But if they lose the levers of government, how do they get control of everything?
Right now, it's interesting. I think they've come to a point now where they don't, not yet, really close, where they don't need government anymore. They don't. They're done. I think you're going to be done with government at some point and say, "You guys, hey, been nice knowing you, but you're out of here." I've said this for years. Sooner or later, the government officials, the Congress, everybody, in a political situation is going to be thrown under the bus by these people.
Interesting. Well, what happened in the last Supreme Court term is that the Chevron doctrine was overturned by a 6-3 decision. The 6, I would call the nominally conservative constitutionalists on the court, and then the 3 liberal lunatic judges voted against it. I've kind of examined it, but there are 2 things, and I'll just say this, and then we'll move on to another topic. I'm not sure that Chevron's going to roll back the deep state, like some people think, because it has to be challenged in court. Now you see Biden trying to change the court, expand the Supreme Court, but you also see there was also a decision of the Supreme Court in the last term on the censorship issue. And I think this relates to tech, and Scott, Britt, and Scott, you can relate in. And in that case, they said, well, yeah, you know, you don't have standing to challenge the government's censorship, like the First Amendment doesn't exist or something. And I'm just concerned. I mean, and so I think that standing doctrine, I fear, will be taken over to the challenges made to the technocratic bureaucrats, running all these things in government. And you're not going to be able to challenge it anyway. And even if you're successful, my view is it's a 20, 30, 40-year project to overturn. I mean, if you look at the censorship, which is really related to our subject tonight, the censorship bureaus that are being set up, and there was just an announcement today by Homeland Security or whoever's running that they're going to reactivate all of those leading up to the election, between now and the election. You're not going to stop them. You can't challenge them. They're going to do what they want. They're going to. I just think we're entering into an era of technocratic speech control and everything like we've never seen. And I'm concerned that there's just not a way for constitutional conservatives to challenge it in court. So if we look at this in terms of a timeline of end times, I don't know that we have 20, 30, 40 years to change that here in the United States. So yeah. I think technocracy marches on is the way that I kind of look at it.
I agree with that, John. I think that, let's not forget about the Hegelian dialectic, which deals with social engineering and changes. And the fact of the matter is that, you've got a lot of power brokers and deep state actors that are manipulating, things like, as you said, the legislative process and branch. You've got control over a lot of the politics and things like that. But, the tech companies also are perpetrating, their agendas almost irregardless of what the law is. And I'll give you a case in point. Who even 2 months ago could have thought that the latest Windows operating system running on a Surface notebook with a new neural processing unit chip in it, this is brand new, just happened, is capable of running AI and doing screenshots of everything that you see on your screen every 2 or 3 seconds, so that it can ingest and train and be available for a feature called recall. So just let that sink in. I mean, this is the technocrats saying to themselves, we need more data. Adobe just got a black eye because they all of a sudden decided in their end user licensing agreements to force a default opt-in to every content creator, every illustrator, every artist. All of a sudden, their artwork was being ingested into AI so that the AI could get better at generative graphics and design, which meant that eventually it would replace the artists. It just, as Tom says, you cannot make this stuff up. And there is an all-out sprint for world domination when it comes to acquiring data. Has anybody else noticed how many times we are forced to acknowledge terms of service changes and all these licensing agreements? It is just, who knows what's going on with all that stuff. It's just, I think those days of us thinking about, I would say, normal processes, normal politics, normal technology, it's over. And I just think that it's unstoppable. No one is going to stop. They are so far ahead of the law in this regard that they are acting with great impunity right now. Britt, I'd be interested in your ideas about this too.
Sure. Well, first, I can confirm what John was saying, which is that DC has grown by leaps and bounds over the last 40 years. I've lived in Virginia my whole life, and it used to be if you went to visit DC, you'd be pretty close to DC before you hit any traffic. Then it became slowly, about 25 years ago, it came around Fredericksburg. Now you go north of Richmond, massive traffic, 4 or 5 lanes all the way up there. It's grown massively. But I agree, there's so many means of manipulation now. They really don't need government because they can lead people to believe that they're making decisions of their own free will that they're not. An example I used today in a text exchange that we had, I tried to look up an article from a couple of weeks ago on the Houthi drone attack on Tel Aviv, happened around mid-July. So I got on Google and I typed in Houthi strike on Tel Aviv, and page one of those results, all the stories that it gave were related to the Israeli counterstrike. So all of the titles were framed in such a way that it was Israel strikes Houthis, Israel bombs Yemen, Israel strikes Yemeni port. And then you go to page two of the search results, and it was the exact opposite. It was the story I was looking for that said, well, Houthis strike Tel Aviv, drone strikes Tel Aviv. And so they know that that's a conscious decision that Google has made to change those first page results, because they know it's maybe 3% of the people make it to the second page. The overwhelming number of people who look up something in a search engine, those first three results, I believe, count for about 80% of the clicks. So they know you're not getting page two. Now, there was not necessarily a false news story there on page one, but it changes the framing in someone's mind when they're looking at that story from the Houthis struck Tel Aviv to the Israelis are the aggressor. And so that's a subtle change, but if you don't understand the history of what happened, then you're easily manipulated into believing that, well, Israel is aggressively attacking its neighbors. And so they're able to create and nudge people toward conclusions that they want them to have.
And I'm sure we're already seeing AI generated news, feeds. And I just wonder, how do we ever trust, whether what we're reading anymore is real? I mean, is it from a human being that has the facts, or is this an AI, trained specifically to spin a narrative that follows the plans of the elite? And I don't know that we'll ever know that answer, but it's not surprising. The Lord said, do not be deceived. And that puts a burden on us, right? Because we have to figure this out. And it's not like the default trust score for what we've known in the past is reliable anymore. And it puts a tremendous burden on people trying to get the facts and connect the dots, actually.
So somebody mentioned Hegelian, I think it was you, Scott, who mentioned Hegelian dialectic. And I don't know what the verb form of that is, Hegelian dialected or whatever, because I feel like it's happening all the time.
It is.
So let me move on to the next topic, because it's kind of related. And we're sort of going to be bouncing around all over the place, because I don't think there's any good linear way to present this. And we want to have a broad discussion of this. That's the whole purpose of this. So, Patrick, you wrote an article about J.D. Vance and his relationship with Peter Thiel. And I saw an interview on a British program called Trigonometry. I love the name some people give to their channels. I think they're very creative. And it was an okay interview. And I was going to play a clip of it. And I thought, it's going to waste our time. But I don't think they were very effective interviewers. They didn't really do a deep dive on anything that Peter had to say. But Peter was sort of apocalyptic and not apocalyptic in the way that he talked about all of the technology and AI and that type of thing that are going on. Facebook just paid a $1.4 billion fine this week for misusing people's private data. And they also took down a post I put up of a podcast because they said it was a podcast I did with JB Hickson at Not by Works. And I think JB's on their list or something, because it went down in a minute. And we removed your post. It violates our community standards. And it appears that you posted this to get likes, which seems kind of, if you're on Facebook, you know that this is a ludicrous statement, because every post and every comment has a like button on it. So it seems like the whole system is designed for you to get likes, but and so now that's the excuse they're using for taking it down. So Peter Thiel was sort of apocalyptic in the way he talked about it, the existential threat posed by AI. And I don't know that talking about it, by the way, in AI terms alone is accurate, because I think it's more tech intrusion and tech control of everything as opposed to just artificial intelligence. But Patrick, tell us what you had to say about Peter Thiel and his relationship with my Senator J.D. Vance.
Yeah, boy. Yeah, you got it right.
Presidential candidate.
You're the guy. Yeah, you're in Ohio. I realize. Peter Thiel is an arch technocrat, number one. This is the guy who founded, or at least was early involvement with PayPal, with Elon Musk back in whatever it was, 2003. He went on to do a lot of venture capital investment, and also he founded the company Palantir, which now is basically the privatized version of intelligence gathering for the world. He serves many governments around the world, including in Europe and, of course, the United States as well. Their first client, after they first got started with a grant from In-Q-Tel, that's the CIA's venture capital company, the first and only client they had for the first 6 years was only the CIA. That just tells you how deeply they got their fingers, their claws into our government. Then as they kind of reached escape velocity, they started to privatize all of the intelligence gathering of the world. This is an amazing coup. So when you look at Peter Thiel, what he's done with Palantir and other investments that he's been part of, you see a guy who is completely off the rails. It's sort of like Elon Musk is in that sense. When I say off the rails, I don't mean he's crazy, but he's outside the social norm at this point. And what he does affects everybody in the world. So when he got an idea that he was going to get into politics, he didn't do it himself. He groomed surrogates to do it for him. That's where J.D. Vance came from. We have another guy in Arizona here who's the same thing. He worked for Thiel. He got out of college, and he was groomed for Thiel to be running in Arizona. This guy moved over. His name is Blake Masters. He moved over here from California, set up camp, and Thiel began to pour millions of dollars into his campaigns, and he's still doing it today. This is exactly what happened with J.D. Vance. So we look at these people like Vance and Masters. What's going on here? Why would Peter Thiel want to get his representatives, if you will, into government? We know now, and by the way, I'll give you a spoiler. The point now is to get people in the government who can unshackle the AI, all of them around the world and in our country as well, to unshackle those people from government regulations. They don't want government looking over their shoulders because they're assuming they're taking their own privatized power to control the world. They don't want governments doing it for them. So anyway, that's kind of the bottom line of it. Where this ends, I don't know, honestly. But when you look at somebody like Peter Thiel, J.D. Vance, he has a beautiful resume. He's conservative, supposedly. He's a model citizen. He's a Marine. You know, who could criticize a guy like that? All I can remember, I just say this. I'm not saying he's a fake, okay? But I remember a time in the 70s when we had a peanut farmer got into politics, first as the governor of Georgia. Then he was groomed by, as it turned out, Zbigniew Brzezinski. He said this later in his memoirs, to be acceptable to the people of America at that point. So Jimmy Carter was a Sunday school teacher. He carried a Bible. He talked about the Lord along the way and said how honest he was. And I remember explicitly how many times he said on public air, "I will never lie to you." That was a big thing back then. "I will never lie to you." And well, after he got elected, guess what? We never heard truth come out of his lips once. Basically, he just schmoozed everybody in sight. That's how he got elected. He ended up to be the worst president we had ever had in the country at that point. But nevertheless, he got out. Reagan came in. But we could be fooled. That's all I'm saying. I don't know that Vance is a complete phony. I don't know that. I really don't want to get in trouble with that. But you get the idea. We could be fooled by this, and people like Brzezinski at that time, who was a genius, a political science genius, literally evil genius, I might add. But somebody like Thiel could do a fantastic job of modeling somebody for us to accept.
That sounds like the same. It's like a reboot of the World Economic Forum's young, global leader system to place the next generation of compliant, politicians and leaders. Yeah. So yeah, it's really hard to see this. I wonder if we should bend over to technology now, John, if that's okay.
Right. Well, I think that the technocracy and things are all related to this, but yeah, I think we should move over to the technology side. And folks, we are monitoring the chat. It's kind of difficult to have a conversation and watch the chat too. So we will get to some questions. I'm sort of making a note of them as we go through. But so let's talk about this, Scott and Britt and Patrick, about how with this election, how does the technology thing play into what we're going to be going through for the next few months? 100 days.
Hey, Britt, if I could negotiate with you live here.
Sure.
Would you take the AI autonomous piece? And you're a subject matter expert in drones and that type of stuff. And I'd like to talk about SpaceX and Musk a little bit. Okay.
Okay.
Sure. All right.
Okay. Well, yeah, I can talk about AI autonomous weapons. There's been a lot of talk about how to regulate that, a lot of calls to set up UN regulations on autonomous weapons and making sure that humans are involved in the decision. And I don't know how realistic that is. And I don't know what they define as human, because we're seeing a merger between human beings and technology. But I don't think that moving forward, I don't know necessarily in the next 100 days, but in the days ahead, we're definitely going to see there's a need for speed. And in a conflict, if you're saying, well, I'm putting a regulation on myself that a human being has to be involved in every battlefield decision, or in battlefield decisions to kill the enemy, then you're going to be outflanked by your enemy who's using that. And so it was mentioned earlier about AI and controlling the world. And back in 2017, Vladimir Putin made the statement in regard to artificial intelligence. And he said, whoever is the leader in this field will be ruler of the world. That was his exact words. And he knows exactly what that means and where this is all leading. And back to that Peter Thiel interview, he actually said, I wrote the quote down, he said, the biggest risk we face is totalitarian one world government. And that would semi-agree with that. I don't think it's a risk. I think it's a certainty. The Bible tells us that it's coming. So a risk implies that somehow it could be avoided. But that's exactly where we're headed. That's exactly where technology is taking us. Artificial intelligence is going to help lead to more advanced development of many of these other technologies like quantum computing and molecular manufacturing, drone swarms. And all of this is going to lead to new weapons systems that could lead to one country very quickly becoming the dominant military force and conquering the entire world. So all of this could change very quickly. We're on an exponential curve when it comes to technological development. And I think a lot of people don't necessarily realize that. We tend to think in these linear terms that tomorrow will be much like yesterday and the same amount of progress will take place, but that's not what's implied by the trajectory we see of technological development and what's coming in the future. And that's another thing that stood out in that Peter Thiel interview was he mentioned it's extremely hard to get a handle on progress in some of these various areas. Well, as a venture capitalist, that's one of the primary things he's trying to do is to understand those things. But I think we're at a point now where the technological change is so rapid, it's impossible for an individual to keep up with it. So what do you think, Scott?
Well, I'm in agreement. And one of the most unrestrained aspects of business development today and maturing process right now is in AI. I've got a friend that is in tech just like I am, and he often shares with me just how he hears from corporate leaders, everyone is working on AI. It doesn't matter what business unit you're in, you've got to have an AI contributory role to the foundational strategies of the company. And I think there's this idea, and I would agree with this, that it's another industrial revolution or information revolution where there's winners and losers, and there could be a complete seesaw of who is actually dominating the next future decade. Now, I don't know that we're going to be around for a decade. So it's interesting, you know, to see what this, I almost think of it as they're building the Babylonian Babel process again. And they're building this pyramid to get up into the heavens, to declare themselves to be God. You hear Yuval Harari say, we're all just hackable animals. I mean, just what's shocking, the end of privacy, he says. There is no privacy. Get over it, he admonishes, right? And I think he's right, actually. I don't think there's any denying that this is where AI and other technologies like this are going. And so at the end of our episode today, we'll have some best practices to share and some helps. We'll speak to this directly. But I think that, you know, one of the things that I'm concerned about, as I think we all are, is just this intrusiveness in all the apps. Everything is asking for permission to use AI features. And my great concern is once you turn that on and authorize that, let's say Microsoft Word or Excel, here, let me help you with this. You probably don't want to enable features like that. So that's how untrusted I believe this process is right now.
Well, but Scott, what do you look for in that kind of a situation? You understand?
Well, sure. What happens is if you can visualize, you know, Microsoft Word or Excel or Outlook, you'll see a column bar, almost a window over there. Even Microsoft Edge has a tab on the side now that when you open it up, it has all of the AI, you know, offers to help you. And that's where that is. But what they're still kind of, I still suspect that they're still over harvesting data without explicit permission. And yet they're asking for permission. So they're looking for your full endorsement of this. And there's this, I'm a tech guy. I have a long history in tech. There's something very smelly about turning on features like that. And I don't know that you can get away from or turn those off completely after the fact. So I'm, you know, I'm actually cynical at this point in my Watchmen process here. I just don't trust anything anymore. And that's where I think a lot of our audience is probably going to relate to that. So it's very hard to navigate all of the complexity and changing variables of what's happening. You're accepting user agreements on your terms have changed, or you're doing updates and you come in the next day and your computer's rebooted. Why? Why did that happen? And all these things are happening. And I just feel just intrinsically impressed by the Spirit that they're working. This is not a thus saith the Lord moment, but it's just like they're moving in degrees of freedom right now to position the mark of the beast and the upcoming control mechanisms and narrative, but they need the systems to do it. And so they're pushing precursors down into our devices and computers. And look, I've got a large foil hat that I wear occasionally, so please forgive me if it sounds bombastic. I'm not being bombastic. I am being truthful with what I'm observing right now. And there's nothing we could really do to stop the advancement of these things that are happening underneath the covers of all of the technology that we use today. Britt or Patrick,
yeah.
I mean, jump in.
I want to expand
I'm out of the
on what
limb
you
here.
were saying. I think it's very safe to say that everything you feed into any sort of AI chatbot is being sucked into that vortex. Otherwise, how is it learning? We would have to trust that there's some fixed data set that they used, and certainly initially to train those, that's what they use, but it's dependent on its growth for everyone feeding into it. And that means intellectual property gets lost. Again, earlier we mentioned artists downloading in and the AI training on that. That should be copyright infringement when you're taking like the works of an artist, or maybe the way that a certain writer they may tend to write, and just copying that over and absorbing it into this giant being. Again, the very pretext of the whole concept of AI and its growth and its ability to learn depends on all of us feeding it data. And so if we have to assume that they're taking everything that you enter into that.
Yeah. Let's remember that none of this is oriented towards the government. Government has no role in here at all. This is all private industry. People like Sam Altman actually is the guy that's kind of started this whole thing when he released ChatGPT 3, whatever it was, 2 years ago. Now we have a bunch of companies that are leaders in AI, and they're all leaping over each other to get to the new iteration. This is not government at all. These are the forces that are taking over the world right now, and independent of what we think the government is doing, because the government has no clue what these people are doing. I guarantee you, they don't. I can't think of one person I know in Washington, D.C., I don't know a lot, but I know some, they just don't have a clue what we're dealing with here. This business of technocracy, technocrats, transhumans, etc. In their laboratories, you can't get in it. Can't get into those places to even see what they're doing. But they'll release something, and then boom, there it is, and just throw it at the world and see what sticks. This is absolutely off the wall as far as we're concerned. We should not be looking at government right now to bail us out of this. If there's any hope, it has to be to either stop using the stuff that they are putting out, or somehow figuring out a way to put a monkey wrench into it so it won't perform.
You know, Patrick, I like your take on this, but I think that let's nuance what you said about the government's not involved at all. And I'd like to suggest that when you see, I mean, think about this, you guys. If the CIA has a venture capital arm, they're part of the government.
Yeah.
They're trying to bypass, you know, governmental checks and balances and the Constitution. And you've got DARPA that's also fully in the venture space. And, you know, a lot of the technology, you know, military and or otherwise, and Britt, your analysis on drones and other things like that are heavily reliant on DARPA funding and let's say nudging ahead these technologies and connecting, you know, young startups with fabulous ideas that they are sponsoring back into the military industrial complex and into government itself. That is originating a lot of it from a governmental covering agency, Patrick. Do you see it that way too?
I would only say organizations like DARPA, the NSA, the CIA, these agencies have been so full of technocrats over the years. I believe they've gone rogue for a long time. That's just my opinion. You know, a lot of people don't agree with me on that, but I think they've gone rogue. They're getting money from taxpayers to fund their operation, but they won't tell you what they're doing.
Black money. It's off the books.
Exactly. It's just, you know, they like the free money, but I think these organizations have demonstrated at this point they're not part of our government in that sense, that even the government can't control these organizations. Witness the CIA when they even back in 1992 when they got a hold of what was his name, Slick Willie, the president. You know, that when they told him, you're going to play ball this way or you're going to get the hideaway, and you know, they told him which way the crow is going to fly, and he had to knuckle under to him. So, you know, who's the dog and who's the tail here? I don't see all these three-letter agencies at this point. I don't see them really as part of the government. They've been taken over by this technocratic movement over the years. That's my opinion.
You guys have raised like a whole host of issues in rabbit trails that we could go down, I think.
As long as we avoid the potholes, we'll be okay, John.
Yeah, I don't know that that's possible at this point, but I was just going to share this. This was an article in the Financial Times a few weeks ago. It was deep fakes elections at risk. So let me give you the context of the date of this article. It's July 7th. That's 6 days before the Trump assassination attempt. That's 13 days before, or 14 days before Biden decides to not run for the office. I guess he can not run for, he's not capable of running for the office, but he can still run the office, which doesn't make any sense to me. But so in this article in Financial Times, they use an example of a deep fake of a politician. Here, look at what this guy is saying. Boy, isn't that sound like him? It's fake. And who did they choose as the politician for the example? Joe Biden. So, I mean, were they telegraphing? And then we couldn't tell whether Biden was alive or not.
I see articles like this as priming. They are priming us with what will eventually occur to discredit, you know, any kind of thing that they want to challenge, basically. So they'll just call it, instead of violating community standards, or instead of, you're doing this to get likes, which I agree with you, John, it's pretty ridiculous. It'll be, you have been flagged as a deep fake, just, these are control points, pinch points that the tech oligarchy get to use at their whim and pleasure right now. And it's all ending up, if you consider the left-right paradigm and how they keep injecting chaos into the system so that everyone will move towards the middle position, which is the synthesis of both. That's all happening. It is happening exactly as we think the Bible predicted it. If you consider Revelation 13 and working backwards, the mark of the beast and the midpoint of the tribulation period, where the false prophet becomes the enforcer of the mark, and that you cannot buy and sell, and you can't have an alternative currency. There's no other asset. Look at what BlackRock is doing with real world assets and all the other things that are happening here. So I think this idea, and by the way, I love what J.B. Hickson talks about when he says things like these different groups and entities, not spiritual entities, but just corporate entities and organizations and leaders and people and so on and so forth, they're competing with each other and they're not efficient. So we don't know who, but they act like they sometimes contradict each other in the plan. And there's this shuffle to see who will lead in the future. And it's just chaos everywhere right now as they try to position their best foot forward on this.
So let me jump back to the drone thing for just a little bit, because we're sort of seeing that play in real times, and we know that in Israel's sort of the central pivot point of Bible prophecy. And Britt, maybe you can address this. I mean, I'm watching this. I'm talking to intelligence people in Israel, and I think they're struggling. So you've got these Houthis who really are poor. Now, well, they're getting funded by Iran, and they're getting stuff, equipment and that type of thing from Iran. But, Israel has these vaunted Iron Dome, protection systems and that type of thing. And yet they launched some drones, and a couple of them make it through and hit buildings in Tel Aviv 1,600 miles away. And there's nothing was done to shoot them down. People were videoed. You always tell when something significant is happening now in the world, because everybody's got their iPhone out taking a video of it, and they're taking videos of these things flying into Tel Aviv. You can hear the sound of the engines. They're not exactly whisper quiet. So Britt, sort of talk about that. You talk about the real, what was it, the Replicator Initiative or whatever it was that came out of the Department of Defense. And how does all this play into how warfare is conducted going forward?
Well, we've already seen the beginnings of this with the war in Ukraine. With October 7th, drones played a pivotal role in both of those. We've seen it in the Red Sea, and it really has dramatically altered warfare, because conventional weapon systems are really antiquated in the face of drones for a number of reasons. One, drones are small, evasive. They're going to get smaller. They're going to get faster. They're going to get better. But we've seen how ineffective conventional warfare is in the war in Ukraine. Both sides are pouring all of their resources into drones. Drones are taking out tanks. They're taking out soldiers on the battlefield. We're seeing it in the Red Sea. Again, other than protection of the United States, the primary purpose of the U.S. Navy is to make sure that the world's waterways are open for free trade among nations. It's one of the things that gives the United States its power, gives the dollar the reserve currency status it has. And yet we've seen since December, when the United States launched Operation Prosperity Guardian, multiple nations, and they said, we're going to open up the Red Sea. And here we are, 8 months later, over 8 months later, they have not opened the Red Sea. If anything, it's gotten worse. And so we've seen an epic failure on that front. These drones, they don't require a large airfield to launch, so they can be hidden, they can be taken out from underground, launched from where they are. And again, that's going to get much more sophisticated over time. We're going to see smaller drones attacking in swarms that are decentralized, especially as they integrate AI into these. And we're seeing a movement away from what the United States has officially has done in the past decades, which is these large, multi-year, billion-dollar programs to develop hardware for the battlefield. Instead, we're seeing a shift toward these smaller drones, and the funds are being, in the research and developments being poured into the software to control drones as munitions, drones as surveillance, drones in their many roles. And we've seen the United States back in August, they announced the Replicator Initiative, which was within 18 months. So here we are, we're not too far away from that. They want to be able to launch hundreds of simultaneous land, air, and sea-based drones against, I believe China was the enemy that they gave in their example. But this is the future of warfare. We're going to see those get smaller. And the key to winning that is who can manufacture those drones at the lowest cost possible. And I believe that's where some of these new technologies come into really upsetting the balance of power. Because once you can achieve that capability to manufacture vast amounts of hardware at low cost and fly them in decentralized drones, think of a swarm of bees. Okay, if you've got a shotgun, you can take down a group of men attacking you, but a swarm of bees isn't going to work. And that's essentially what conventional warfare is experiencing on the battlefield. And we're only in the early innings of drone warfare. So I don't know what everybody else thinks about that, but
yeah, I
I'll
think
open up
that's
the floor.
clear. Yeah. Britt, I'm curious, do you think that the reason why these few drones are getting through all the way is, I mean, Iran has a significant hacker community that's state controlled. They're actually quite reputable. And do you wonder if they've penetrated the Israeli radar systems like Israel is known to do with others and kind of tampered with us? Have you heard any news about that?
I haven't heard any specific news on that, but it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, we can't exclude that as a possibility.
Yeah.
But it's also, the smaller that these things get, the harder it is to tell the difference between a flock of birds and an incoming enemy. And that's exactly why, this is going to get harder and harder to deal with. And the only way that you're going to be able to defend against a swarm of drones is with another swarm of drones. And I really think once you get to that, I believe the key technology here is molecular manufacturing. And we don't hear a lot about that talked about in the media, but that would totally shift the balance of power overnight. Because instead of currently we build things from the bottom down, breaking matter into smaller and smaller pieces. With molecular manufacturing, we would be building up from the atomic level with atomic precision. It would allow very efficient solar energy and solar energy storage. It would allow lighter, stronger materials. It would enable the rapid manufacture of drones on a mass scale in the form of trillions, and it would overturn mutual assured destruction. because there would be nowhere to hide. And in fact, we had an article we had all looked at earlier where they were talking about satellite constellations over the United States or over the whole world. And one of the quotes in there was, "There's nowhere to hide." And so soon that will be true for nuclear submarines. And once that takes place, mutual assured destruction no longer applies. That's what's kept the major powers from going to war with each other since World War II. And I believe that whoever develops this technology first and is the leader in it will use that first mover advantage to conquer the globe and establish a global empire.
Yeah, John, could you put up the satellite thing from Starlink, please? All right. Now, I want to explain this to our audience if you haven't seen this yet. We know that Elon Musk has, basically founded SpaceX among his other massive companies. And he has been launching, satellite systems into space for some time now. I can't remember the number. It's changing every week. I think he's putting up a Falcon 9 rocket that's got a big payload of satellites, and they just slough off in a chain, and then they go deploy themselves around orbit. But just so our audience understands, how pervasive these communication systems are, every one of those dots that you see around the globe, and John, if you could spin it just for a bit, this is an interactive map. And you could see.
Scott, can I ask you a question real quick? So,
sure.
In the map at this level, it probably didn't show up on the screen very well, but where you see just the dots, there's like a honeycomb pattern. And there's some areas that are red, some are white. They're like little red dots, white dots. Is that a honeycomb pattern? Does that kind of indicate the areas of coverage?
Every one of those dots is capable of receiving and sending signal. It's a mesh network. A mesh means it's peer-to-peer.
Right.
So all of these satellites are, coordinating the signal just like cell towers do. They also do the same thing. They have different signal strengths, and whoever has the strongest signal is the one that services that cell phone in the middle of the Sahara Desert.
I got my first ad yesterday on my phone for a Starlink account. Sign up for Starlink and take the internet anywhere in the world. And we've had missionaries from Africa come and they'll tell us that in Africa, this was a number of years ago, they told me this, everybody in Africa's got a cell phone because they can't afford to put landlines in, but they can put up cell towers, and now they can put up Starlink satellites, and everybody's kind of connected.
Same is true with India.
Everybody is connected.
Right. Third world countries and those that are still developing are cell dependent, which is why I believe that cell phone still plays a precursor role to the control mechanisms needed to end up at the mark, no matter what that looks like. There's a lot of speculation about, is that a graphene-based injection? Is that one of those imprints? Britt, remind me what that Microsoft technology was. It was something that kind of like penetrated your skin and left mark. It left some ink in there. I
believe it was a tattoo.
It was called a quantum dot tattoo. There's been a patent for it, but I don't think it's not been rolled out and implemented yet. There were a lot of theories that it was, but I've not seen any evidence that it has been.
I think Bill Gates owns that patent, along with one called luciferase. You can't make this stuff up. That's what the chemical is, I think. So he's got a patent on that too. But let's draw our attention.
There was the thing that they had the ID system, body-based ID system, and I don't know if they're trolling us or not. Okay,
no, they're competing entities trying to get dominance over
but the
what's
patent
coming.
number on that patent application was 606060.
Yeah, that's taunting. Yeah, we see
so
that.
I think they're kind of trolling us a little bit. Like, we'll show you conspiracy theorists, guys, a few things here. Ha ha ha.
Yeah, I actually do agree with that. That's taunting. Very prideful, arrogant thing to do, but they do it. This is their modus. But drawing our attention back to the satellite map, if you guys realize that they're putting up, I think there's 8,000 or more satellites up in space right now, and they're building out, last number I heard was 14,000 of these satellite systems, then you can imagine that this is why I think we understand at this point, as we've seen more stage setting happening, that the system of the beast has to be almost in place before it can be handed over to the Antichrist when we're gone and when the 7-year peace covenant is signed with Israel. So I think even Tom Hughes has mentioned, the Antichrist is not going to look puzzled by this whole deal and say, well, we need a GoFundMe to fund all of this. No, I think my personal view is that some of those 10 kings are the tech oligarchs that are handing over the keys to their technical kingdom to the Antichrist at the right time. And we're not going to be here to see that. And I know we have differences of opinions in the audience on timing of the rapture. Let's not go down that rabbit hole right now. But this is a way to visualize the oppressive presence of that technology. And if this isn't sobering, I don't know what is,
Well, and this ties into many of these other technologies. So we have not only this, we've heard about digital ID, central bank digital currency, but you mentioned earlier real world assets and the tokenization of real world assets. And that really boxes everybody into a cage, because as all of those real world assets get added to the blockchain, which, think of it as, a central ledger similar to what would be in the old courthouse that would give you the deed to your property or the deed to your car, all of that going on the public blockchain, but for everything, including, my laptop computer or a gold bar, stocks, bonds, houses, property, everything you own. It creates a world where you can't have a black market in many items. It really limits what you could have a black market in, because how do you trade something? How do you say, I want to own that asset now, but if it's pledged to that blockchain, legally you don't own it unless you make that ownership public through that blockchain that they're using. So they're creating a system that no one will be able to escape once it comes into existence. There would be virtually no way to operate outside of it, because everything will be in it.
Yeah, there's a gold rush coming on how to fractionalize ownership of nature. I mean, the ocean, land, BLM land, the Bureau of Land Management, they're trying to fractionalize actually everything, including the earth. So it is the ambition of BlackRock to do this is pretty stunning. I don't know that they'll be able to fully implement their fractional ownership systems to buy and sell pieces of Yosemite, for example. I live in California. I'm not that far from there, but can you imagine owning, a millionth share of Half Dome? That's what we're talking about. And you would pay for the privilege of owning that.
What would you get for owning it?
Well, in the case of
like you get
non-fungible
to go look at
tokens,
it or something.
So in non-fungible tokens, remember this is 4 or 5 years now that it's been possible to own a piece of original art, digital art. And it's like think of it like an icon or a badge. And you can own that. I mean, some people have paid millions of dollars for some of these images, and they hold it in their wallet, their crypto wallet. They are the undisputed owner of that asset. And that's the same kind of concept. These are the real world asset stuff is rolling out. It's going slow, don't you think, right now, Britt? But it's going to be a noose that comes very quickly, I think.
Sure. And I think the way they'll sell a lot of this, and you ask, what do you get, John, is let's take a mortgage, for instance. They fractionalize that so that maybe you can invest $10 in buying somebody's mortgage, and then you get a fraction of the payment and the cash flow that's used every month to pay down that mortgage. In the case of a place like Yosemite, if you've got a landmark, there may very well be copyrights associated with postcards that appears on, or photography, images, the intellectual property that receives a cash flow as a result of that intellectual property and the goods that are attached to it. And you could sell that fractionally, and people would take an interest in buying a piece of the Statue of Liberty, for example, and then every time that image is used, they get a royalty in exchange. So there's probably no end to the ways they'll devise to be able to monetize and cash flow everything in the physical world based on that means. So that's where it would come from.
I just wanted to return back for a second to the comment. We've alluded to it earlier, but now that we have this imprint of these satellite mesh networks around the globe and how inescapable that already appears to us at this point, you guys should be aware that I think SpaceX was just awarded a multi-year contract to launch spy satellites, literally spy satellites up into space. That are serving the NSA and other security entities like that. And I guess the quote is, no one can hide. So it's that oppressive part of the system that's coming is, I think it's going to crush people, honestly. So it's going to be very, very difficult to get through that. And I want to talk just for a moment, since we're on AI, and this one other side topic here is the XAI. There's some stunning things that are happening with Elon Musk and the X Twitter AI system. They just put in a data center, and my mind still can't get around how they did this, but they're building a data center. I believe it's in Phoenix somewhere. Yeah, I could be wrong on that, but they got that data center up and running with all the compute chips, the H100s from NVIDIA, in, I believe it's 19 days. And they were training on those servers already. So the advancement of the pace of investment in data centers. I think in the prior roundtable, we did talk about data center investments right now. And NVIDIA makes the claim, Jensen Huang, of the CEO of NVIDIA, that, you really don't think of a data center as a building anymore, which is what the classic view has always been, or a group of server racks and rows of them, endless rows of server racks. He characterizes a data center actually as the deployed system, including all the servers and everything that it's a part of. So the data center is being redefined by AI, basically. And there you go. Yeah, I don't know if that's the same data center. I think it was in Atlanta.
That's an article about one building being built in Atlanta. I couldn't find the Phoenix.
Yeah, I think that's still coming.
But they have them here, and they're causing all kinds of problems with the power grid, Microsoft is training, which I think Microsoft is the largest AI company currently. Although they're not the most valuable, I think NVIDIA is like worth $4 trillion or $4 or $5 trillion now.
Well, Elon claims that his new data center with Grok, which is their new chip that accelerates the processing of natural language. It's a natural language processing specialized chip that they're getting 20 times faster response from interactions with AI, which also makes it seem as though you're talking to a real person, because this awkward pause when you submit a chat or a prompt, you know, and I use AI extensively for work, okay, programming. So when you do this, there's this pause and it grinds away and then it starts talking back to you through the window. And that is largely mitigated now. You can almost have a natural language conversation with these AIs powered by Grok. So when Elon is saying that he's got the largest, fastest data center, AI-based one, using Grok and all these other advanced technologies, he'll be on a completely different level, I think. Patrick, you follow AI and technology quite a bit. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, exactly. That plant that Elon took over was in Memphis, Tennessee, actually.
Oh, you're right, Memphis. Thank you.
And it was an abandoned building. There was a huge, I can't remember the name of the company, but you recommend Electrolux or something like that, maybe, but it was a huge, huge building. And they took it over and they gutted it and moved the information, the equipment into it. And they did that in 90 days. That's never been done anywhere in 90 days. I guarantee you, no way. There might be other abandoned buildings like that around the world, around the country, but there's not many for sure. So he pulled off a coup of sorts. And what's happening? We have several of these facilities in Mesa, Arizona, and Phoenix, Tempe, and so on around Arizona, where they come in and they establish a foothold, and then they expand that once they get the approval and they start one unit, then they get approval for another one, and all of a sudden you have a nest of these things, huge facilities that are sucking all the power in the universe into the core. And our community, for instance, we cannot sustain this. There's no way. These people are going to suck every erg of power out of our grid that citizens need for instance, to cool their houses in the summertime.
Charge their EVs.
Exactly. Yeah. So this is pretty disturbing. But this is the wave of the future right now. These data centers are not simply there to be an AI assistant to you or for your pleasure to have something to chat with, or talk to or do something. That's not what this is all about. I don't think. I think what you're going to see in the end is that these data centers combined at some point to take advantage of that grid, that the mesh grid that you just saw. I love that image, by the way. If you can get it in there again, it'd be great. John, that picture about the mesh network.
Yeah, I'll get that up. Just give me a second.
In any case, let me just say that the idea, I think, in the end of this is going to be to build a model of the world that could be reflective of all of the systems, all of the geography, all of the things that move, everything, all systems, travel, infrastructure, every pipeline, every ship that moves, etc. The idea of taking this this satellite from information and data from space, drilling it down to capture all of the information on planet Earth. This eventually will be, this is the term that would use here. This will become a digital twin of planet Earth in the end.
I think that's already here, don't you? I mean,
well,
don't you
think
they're already working on it?
It's coming. Obviously, they're talking about it, and it's in literature. You can see people talking about it in videos and stuff. Mucky mucks in that space, especially the geospatial space. But you can see microcosm of this. For instance, India 2 years ago said they were going to create a digital twin of 100 cities, large cities in India. That means they're going to get an image of the city, for one, all the buildings, all the sensors and everything, all the data collected out of those systems will be fed into an AI program that will literally model a twin of that whole city. So you can zoom into one building on how that building is going to affect other buildings. You can see where the power flows are. You can see the sewer flows, the people movement, all that stuff, where the power has been used. This is a new technology that's expanding beyond the city now, where they're actually talking at building, for instance, a model about a state now. I don't say where, but this is going to expand to the global level. The United Nations is already talking about this now in concept, where they'll have eventually applied model where you can get every conceivable thing about the ecosystem, the way things happen, the way the currents of the oceans, you name it. It'll be part of this master model of our planet. When this happens, when you talk about all other things like the central bank digital currencies, the flow there of those things, the assets of the world, ownership of those things, when you look at this concept of actually have everything under one umbrella that you can control, you have it's not just a beast system with a small b. We're talking about capital letters here.
Oh, wow.
That's going to be the beast system that we'll see in Revelation 13 in the end. This where everything is controlled, micromanaged from the top down, where everything can be seen, and all of the other people who are not going to play ball with that, and especially the worship of Antichrist. Anybody who will not play ball with that system at that point, it's going to be a foregone conclusion that they'll be so easy to identify at that point and be killed.
So, Patrick, I'd like to add another component to that, because you're absolutely right. The physical world is being mapped. I think of it like Metaverse 2.0. Metaverse was supposed to be for gamers and using avatars and things like that. But this is a real version of that, right, in the real world. But I think the other half of this is not just the digital physical representation of the world, but then what I've heard is that they are using our social media and our behavioral tracking in the GPS telemetry. Where do we go? When do we go? What are our patterns? Who do we know? Who are we interacting with, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then when you put that into the physical, digital representation of that, now you've got predictive programming, where if they want to find Scott Townsend, they will know that I go to this church on Sunday, and they just meet me at the door and cart me off in handcuffs. I mean, they put their VR glasses on. They understand the layout. They know real time they tap into the security cameras. They know exactly what's going on. And
I think it goes even beyond that. Scott, and two, they know things about us already that we don't necessarily know about ourselves. And
Right.
I use this example happened to me maybe 6 months or so ago. It was right before we were going to bed, and I turned on the TV, and I forget what it was that I wanted to watch, but all I did was think about it. Right. And this was not something that was part of my routine. I hadn't looked at this in quite some time. And I forget who it was. It was a preacher. His name escapes me right now, but I wanted to pull that up and watch a sermon of his. And he had passed away a year earlier, so it wasn't something that was part of the routine. But I thought about it when I turned on the TV. It was the first example that it gave me. And I had not seen that up for
there's
a
whispers
year.
of this that
so it read my mind effectively.
There's already whispers of this going on, that some of the earbuds or headphones or the new Microsoft augmented reality system, that they're able to read the brain waves, and who knows what's fact or fiction right there, but that's just scary.
Yeah, they've done testing in labs where people think of something, in their mind they have a vision, and then it actually puts it on a screen, types out what they are thinking about.
And
so
even
no
further,
doubt
they do images. So
right.
They can actually do generative images now too. Think of a horse, it draws the horse. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, and some of them are actually pretty good. I would just advise people, don't make the mistake I made. I was talking to PM one day, and I said, "Are you stuck in traffic on the freeway trying to get on, the big freeway to come home?" And she goes, "How did you know that?" And I made the mistake of saying, "Well, there's an app on your iPhone called Find My Phone." And now I get this calls or texts from my wife. "Why did you stop at Burger King? Did you stop there to get yourself a milkshake or something? What are you doing?" So she's like so I don't need
I love that
Elon Musk or anything. So if anybody has a suggestion on how I can get like a ghost phone, that
don't go there.
It says I'm at the library. I'm in the religious section. I'm at the jewelry store shopping or something like that.
While you're chowing
yeah,
down.
I would be on board with that.
You need a pager. Go back to get your pager from 20 years ago. I know you'd use one.
Yeah, I want to show you. I'll put up this. I had the shot up there for a minute. This Google Earth of New Albany, Ohio. I've talked about it a lot. These white buildings that you see, sort of. I don't know if my cursor shows up, but the long white buildings there. That's a Meta server farm. Meta spent over $2 billion constructing that. Each of those buildings is as long as the Empire State Building is tall, and they're just racks of server. And then directly across the street, sort of in the lower left, is those white buildings. That's a Google server farm. And Google spent $6.8 billion building that server farm. And then if you go to the north above the freeway, I don't have it on the screen, but it's Amazon server farm. And then Amazon has the largest trucking warehouse I've ever seen there by the freeway. They're building an identical one next door. It must be 100 bays. I mean, and so the money is just tremendous. And then Intel is spending, the plan is just south of the Meta server farm. They're building the largest chip plant in the world, similar in size to the one I think they're building out there near you in, is it Chandler or Mesa? Patrick. Mm-hmm. And their ultimate plan is to spend $100 billion constructing the chip plant.
Yes.
And the question is, where do they get in the water and where are they getting the power from? Now, so I know Microsoft is training AI to shorten the time that they can build small nuclear power plants to power these server farms, which I don't mind. I mean, I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
That's probably the cleanest energy out there, but it's crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, Britt, I'm interested in your thoughts regarding this new technology that I didn't know that this was out there until Musk brought it up as like he basically alluded to the fact that this is a game changer for battery storage technology. And I think that he has contracted with a Chinese manufacturing company to put this into their battery systems going forward. Do you want to talk about that in relationship to the quick charge times and the longevity of those batteries, but also how this might work into these drones and molecular manufacturing if you can enable technology advancements like graphene and aluminum oxide or whatever it is that they have now created?
Sure. I think again, with if we take a step back and look at not necessarily where these things are going, because they are getting much more sophisticated, they're getting cheaper, having longer battery life. I think this had moved from 100 miles to 600 miles on a 10-minute charge, I think is what they mentioned for that battery. So obviously that enables a wider range for these drones and operating times for drones. But as we go forward, it's going to be leaps and bounds above that, because when you start building from the bottom up, which is what you would be doing with molecular manufacturing, you can duplicate or copy anything we see in the physical world and have complete computer control over it. So one of the things we were looking at, there was a Swiss company, I believe it's called Final Spark. It's actually using human brain neurons grown from stem cells. 10,000 neurons will go on this chip and process things at the same speed, at much higher speeds than we see with silicon, but using 500,000 times less power. So the human brain uses around 20 watts to operate, whereas it would take 10 megawatts, so a megawatt being 1,000,000 watts, to operate the same functioning computer power, I guess you could say, in silicon. So as these data centers proliferate and this technology proliferates, again, the problem they're facing is it's sucking up all the power. And eventually you're going to have torches and pitchforks as people say, I want to turn on my air conditioning, as Patrick was saying. So the solution is found right here, again, in the human brain, and they're going to be using biological organisms, melding them with these technologies. And that leads us right into transhumanism. I've often said AI is not the concern. It's human beings wielding AI, fallen mankind. Elon Musk, when he was talking about this Neuralink brain chip, he mentioned, oh, well, the blind will be able to see, right? The lame will walk. Where have we heard all that before? And, oh, I'm going to get one too. So they claim that that the Neuralink was for, helping people with paralysis be able to regain use of their limbs. Last I heard, I didn't know that Elon Musk was paralyzed, but he's going to get one too. So the transhumanists, they look forward to merging with technology. And this is sort of an entry level using human brain neurons to be able to power electronics more efficiently using less electrical power. And it sort of sets the stage for the growth of that. Now, right now, these neurons last 90 days. But again, we know the human brain lasts a lot longer than 90 days. So it's just a matter of overcoming those obstacles. But they will, as we see technologies like a technology like molecular manufacturing come to fruition. So it's only a matter of time, in my opinion.
Yeah. For our audience, the other term used for that is called organoid intelligence, OI. So if you want to do research on that, that's a good entry point. They basically put cell clumps inside of a petri dish, hook it to a computer, and they train it. It's unbelievable what they can do with it now. So when you see the battery efficiency and you see molecular manufacturing, this is where you get into the Sam Altman economic worldview, where he says, you'll get less money with your universal basic income, but things will be so much cheaper that you'll live like a king. Do you recall him saying that?
Yeah. I mean, that
Totally.
in a free market world, that theoretically could be true, but you're going to be a slave to the system again. Nothing will be outside of the control of the system. And so we may very well see a world where the standard of living is higher, but if you don't have freedom and liberty, what good does it do?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Britt, I think I remember you sent me a copy of your book, Racing Toward Armageddon, that you published about 7 years ago, because I had made a comment sitting in Jerusalem in a Christian media summit for that was put on by the Israeli government about 1.5 years ago. And one of the rich guys was presenting, and he said, it just, he's talking about AI, and we're gonna do everything. It's gonna be great. And so we're sitting there in Jerusalem, and he says, "We will make the lame walk." That's exactly what he said. And I because he was talking about the ChatGPT, which had just been rolled out a week before, and then I had noticed, and then I kind of remembered I'd seen the rollout of the Neuralink, and the order that they went in was, we will make the lame walk, the blind see, the deaf hear. That was the order that Musk used when Neuralink had its big, the big sort of product rollout. And that's exactly the order that Jesus said to the disciples of John when they came to him. John said, go and ask him. And they said, "Are you the one, or should we look for another?" And he said, "You go tell him that you've seen the lame walk, the blind see, the deaf hear." And so there's this imitation of Christ, sort of a pseudo Christ methodology that they're doing. They're sort of reenacting the messianic miracles.
Yeah, you think of all the technologies we've talked about today coming to their ultimate fruition. And Patrick described this world where basically everything is known. Everything happening is known. Think of the world's view of the Antichrist when he arrives on the scene, and the blind can see, the lame can walk, the deaf can hear. He knows everything, or at least seems to in their eyes. And, well, he dominates the entire globe, so there's peace, right? So we've got world peace, all these counterfeit miracles taking place. It's going to seem to the world as if he will be this messianic figure to the world. And the Bible tells us everybody whose name is not written in the book of life will worship the beast, not look up to him or idolize him, but worship him. So these types of technologies will enable this, and will enable this consolidation of power in the end times. I don't know if anybody has anything to add to that.
We're entering this time of I talk about it every week. Acceleration and convergence of all of these things related to the end time. And Patrick, I'll just reiterate what you had said many months ago, that when this false prophet and the Antichrist come on the scene, the Antichrist is not going to commit the abomination of desolation, and then they're going to sit down and say, "Hey, how do we develop the mark of the beast?"
Exactly.
they're going to say, hey, let's, they're not going to try to crowdfund it then. It's going to be ready to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is just me, but I think that it could roll out prior to the midpoint of the tribulation, but it won't be enforced as unto death until the midpoint. So we don't exactly know,
Yeah.
So, John, you reminded
it'll be rolled out, and yeah, we're getting to that point, Scott. So, Scott, you had some good thoughts about how we sort of an action plan or how we deal with this and that type of thing. And let me just first say, folks, we really appreciate you listening. If we have time at the end, we need to do a couple of questions. I've saved a couple, but so we're not ignoring you. It's just very difficult to manage the chat and listen and participate in the discussion. But if you would, there's links to everybody's social media and websites and that type of thing. So if you would, click like and subscribe at these websites and channels and that type of thing to help everybody out. So there are resources down there in the show notes, at least on my YouTube channel. The Fellowship Bible Chapel's YouTube channel has that description. I think also in Real FBC on Rumble, I put those in. So Scott, let's now that the commercial is over,
so
let's go to some practical steps.
I don't remember if this is our 4th or 5th tech roundtable, John, but it's been we've been on a journey as a team, as a group here, cohort, and one of the things that I know is on our heart, and is that how do we reduce all of this stuff down into a list of encouragements and best practices and what do we recommend? And I think, I'm tired of hearing myself say, well, somebody should do this, publish a book, do something like that. And I think it's time for us to really bear down on this because we know we're getting closer. And I think that it's important for us to talk openly and honestly, almost as though we're around the kitchen table right now, just talking as the body of Christ. Okay. And I know, Britt, you also have some ideas, but I wanted to just I'm going to read through my top 10 things and pieces of advice and reminders for us. And then I've got a bonus section here in a second. So number 1, the Bible predicts that things will get worse, not better. Guard your heart. 2, spiritual warfare is rising. Evil is in the open, and the assault comes from every angle now. 3, watch for blind spots in your armor and watch out for flaming darts. Not just darts, but flaming darts. They will come from unexpected sources and directions. 4, be sure to be in community. Isolation will hurt you. Do not isolate yourself. Do whatever is necessary for you to forge relationships, patch up broken relationships, patch up things, get to know your neighbors, make sure that you're in a small group at church, gather people at the coffee shop. Whatever you need to do, you must have peer-to-peer support system. Okay. Don't trust that there's going to be an overwatch taking care of you. You have to figure this out. Okay. That's a strong word of encouragement there. 5, avoid advanced AI features. If you can, by the way. Sometimes there's a work requirement and you may have to comply to that. That's a different matter. I'm talking about elective use of AI. So what I mean is, remember we talked about the new Windows laptops, the Surface laptops with AI built into the operating system. I wouldn't do it if you can avoid it. Be careful of things like that. The encroaching permissions and pressure that applications they're annoying. They're very annoying, but don't yield to those prompts saying, can AI help you? We can help you with this. Don't do that. Okay. Number 6, listen to this. If you are in a sensitive conversation and you wear smart devices, it is not enough to put your stuff into airplane mode. Start thinking about putting your devices in a blackout bag. I've got several in different form factors. If you need to have a confidential conversation, you don't want anyone, including AI, to spy on you, the only way to do it is to turn your stuff off and stick it in a bag like that that's shielded, okay?
Sometimes that's called a Faraday bag, right?
Is also known as a Faraday bag. Thank you, John. It's very inexpensive. They're 20, 30 bucks, whatever it is. It's worth every penny now that we can't essentially trust who is listening to us and what they may be up to. Number 7, read the word. I'm not kidding. You know, sometimes I don't know how to say this strongly enough, and I think we as a team are saying that. You've got to be in the word. If you've read it 100 times, begin your 101st, journey through the word of God. You've got to stay attached to the truth of the word of God. Be a Berean. Your source of truth isn't us on this panel. It is the Bible, period. 8, be about the Father's business. Every day counts as we see the day approaching. And one of the things that I am coaching myself and trying to manage is my fear and emotions as I see the technology chokehold that's coming and the oppressive spirit that is coming. And one of the things that I have resolved to do with these feelings, these are very deep feelings because we have loved ones that are going to be affected with all of this, is we have to basically take every opportunity that we can to take the fear that we may be feeling and reinterpret that sense of fear as an emotion as adrenaline. Think of it as adrenaline. It's like we know that the end is one day closer than when we first believed. And even though we don't know the day or the hour, we know the season that we're in. And so we need to reimagine what that feeling of fear is and use that as a pivotal rallying point in our spirit about pressing on as a warrior. Okay, hope that made sense. 8. I think I did 8. 9. Work on sanctification. You are the bride of Christ. Act like your wedding day could be tomorrow. Okay, that's a mic drop moment. Yield to Christ and the Holy Spirit. There's refining that is going on. There are more temptations than ever right now in this age. And so we have to take mental discipline, spiritual authority over the distractions and things of this world. And we really have to cooperate with this process of detaching sufficiently so that we're looking up and not looking towards a political savior or any other savior for the matter. We have to focus on Christ alone. Number 10, share the gospel. Follow the prompting of the Holy Spirit as you interact with other people. Help people connect the dots. And one special bonus that I wanted to share with our team here in our community. You are the Watchman community. I know you are. All of us here are Watchmen on this panel. The Watchman community has been prepared for this moment in time. My journey as a Watchman began 7 or 8 years ago. My eyes were open. The Lord brought that, to my attention, and I started to voraciously learn. We have spent years preparing for the next set of conversations that are going to happen when things begin to seriously break in the world and people's worlds are being turned upside down. They don't have context of the Bible. They don't have context of the evil plans and schemes of the elite. They don't understand at all. And so we have to be there for them. Look for pastors and to be overwhelmed as these dominoes begin to be pushed out. You, as the Watchman community, you have been planted in your church for such a time as this. You're the one that has increased in discernment and awareness of these days. You are the one that turns to your pastor and say, how may I serve you now? Do not take an opportunity to unleash your frustration and anger at all the wasted rejection and time that's gone by that could have been more productive to wake up and educate the body of Christ in your local congregations. Cooperate with your pastor. Do not do a dump truck and dump everything that you know. It's just too much. Listen carefully and meet your pastor where the pastor is. Do not exceed, the bandwidth of your pastor. His eyes are going to glaze anyway. Are we agreed? So have an open hand. You've been prepared for this season. Your role as a watchman, although it looks marginalized right at this moment, and all of us could testify to this, no one listens. No one returns your emails. No one really cares. But that moment is going to pivot, and the Lord is going to raise up awareness that their plan to, let's say, do sermon series like normal, like nothing else is happening in the world, those days, I believe, are coming to an end. There will be a lot of turmoil, and pastors will not be able to duck or hide or say they don't understand. They will have to grasp with these things, and we have to be there for our pastors. Don't make me cry right now. This is very, very personal for us. We have spent years on this, and the emotions that we deal with rejection and people that just don't care, scoffing and mocking, all that stuff. We have to take authority over those negative sentiments, and we have to turn that around to serve others, okay? All right. That's the end of my soapbox. Thank you for giving me some attention.
Patrick, Britt, do you have anything?
Britt, I think you had some things to say too.
Sure. I want to expound upon point 10 that Scott just mentioned, which is we should be ready at all times to give an account for the hope that we have in Jesus Christ. And we mentioned earlier the Peter Thiel interview and how he said the biggest risk we face is totalitarian one world government. And again, I don't think that's a risk, it's a certainty. The Bible tells us it is. So it made me think, well, what is the biggest risk we face? And I don't want to assume that everybody who stumbles upon this right now or at a later date knows Jesus. But the biggest risk humanity faces, every human being on earth, is that you might die in your sins. What does that mean? Well, the Bible says that we are all born sinners. That just means that we've fallen short of God's mark of perfection. And the Bible also says the wages of sin is death, which means that the consequence of that imperfection is eternal separation from a holy God once we pass from this earth, meaning we would be in hell, separate from God. That's a terrible place to be. But the good news is that while we were still sinners, Jesus Christ, he came to earth. He lived a perfect, sinless life. He went to the cross. He died on the cross and shed his blood and paid the penalty for our sin. He stood in our place so that we could be reconciled with God. When God looks upon us, he sees his perfect Son. And after he died on the cross, Jesus rose again in victory, and he's seated at the right hand of God right now, preparing a place for us in heaven. Everybody who believes in him and trusts in him has life, and has life abundantly. So guys, the biggest risk we face isn't anything this world throws at us. As Jesus said, don't fear man who can only kill body, but God who can kill body and soul. As the biggest risk we face as individuals, as humanity on the globe, is that you might die in your sins. Make sure You have a saving grace relationship with Jesus Christ, that you know him, that you're putting your full trust in him, not your own works, any good deeds, or how you think you're good enough to be in God's presence. You're not. We're not. None of us are. It's only through Christ that we are redeemed. And that's the most important thing that we can know in any day or time, but especially in this age. I don't know if Patrick or John have anything to add.
You covered it all. You turned very good. Very good. John?
I think you're on mute, John.
Muted.
I would just encourage people to pray for all of us, to pray for each other. We're entering into a time that's going to seem very disconnected. I just think it's difficult. So, everybody always, what are we going to see before we're out of here? And the answer to that now is at least everything we've seen so far, and a lot more. And so I don't know when we're getting out of here. I don't know that I'm going to, I don't know the method of my exit, the timing or method of my exit. And I think we all need to live like that, live with that expectation that any moment we could meet the Lord. So we need to live, I think Scott nailed it when he talked about sanctification, working on your sanctification. I think we need to live lives like that. We're in a difficult time. I think we need to be around other believers. And that can be in many ways. It could be physical, it can also be online and that type of thing. But I think you need to make an effort to do that. And I would also encourage people that when you do that, to kind of set aside your personal agenda. I am constantly inundated. And I'm not saying I don't appreciate people sending me things, but I am just hammered every day with all of these different ideas on views on the end times. And to be honest with you, some days it wears me out. And it wears me out because I'm concerned that people have turned their views into a hammer to pound on everybody else. Everybody else becomes a nail to pound on with your hammer. And I think we need to avoid that in the body of Christ.
Yeah, I call that conduct unbecoming the body of Christ.
Yeah.
We should avoid that.
So we will do another one of these. I don't know when. They're just sort of randomly scheduled when one or two of us get an idea. Hey, we need to do another one of those. I know we didn't get the questions tonight. I kept those. Next time we do those, I'll try to address them. I'll give the guys one of them from Scott, our friend Melissa, AI quantum merger. How soon can we expect it? And what are the potential ramifications? And that's probably a whole discussion in and of itself, because I will just tell you, I'm in regular contact with people who are insiders within the tech industry. And I'm regularly told, whether it's defense or tech or whatever, you need to understand that we're much further down the road on this than you know about. And by the way, there are believers that work in this industry. You need to pray for them because they need a lot of prayer coverage. Because I think sometimes there's ethical issues to wrestle with, but it's no different than ethical issues I wrestle with from time to time in the practice of law. So keep everybody in prayer, keep in community. I'll just throw it out there one more time to all the guys. Anything to add before we sign off?
It's a great privilege to address this audience, and I'm looking forward to our next time, if we are still here, God willing.
Yeah. By the way, Scott, I'm going to try to take your 10 items and I'm going to try to put that into a short video, one of those shorts that they put on YouTube, and put that up.
Oh, great. Yeah.
That
Merge
would
it
be
with Britt's. He's got a very good list too.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, anything else, guys?
I don't think so.
Scott, could I just ask you to close us in prayer?
Be happy to. So, Father, thank you so much for this time. Thank you for protecting the glitch problems with streaming services and things, and protecting our conversations right now. I pray for all of this to sink in the right way, the way that you intend it to be. For those that are challenged by these things, I pray that they are encouraged. We turn that fear into adrenaline at the proximity of your appearing, Lord. So help us to finish strong. That is our number one goal right now, and to stay rooted in the word and in community with each other. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, everybody, guys. I'm going to say goodbye to you on the other side as we end the stream. God bless everyone. Good night.
Good night.
Peace.